Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Andrew Doan. Is he here? Okay, perfect. He is an expert in digital media addictions. He speaks around the world. He's trained over 2,000 mental health providers on this topic. With a PhD degree in neuroscience and an MD degree, his background in molecular neuroscience and the vision system aids in depth of knowledge into these areas of gaming and digital media addictions. He completed his MD and PhD degrees at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and he has a master's in public health degree at the University of West Florida. He completed medical residency in ophthalmology and aerospace medicine. Dr. Doan is author of Hooked on Games and the Digital Vortex Survival Guide, Behaviors, Digital Media, and the Brain. He's going to talk to us today about digital media and gaming, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love following Andy Lee. He actually was my neuro-op professor and mentor when I was at the University of Iowa. And it's great. So he talked like that back then, and 15 years later, he's still super fast. All right, so a few disclaimers. I just can't get into my background and what I do for the government, but they make me put the slide up that the views today are my own and not of the Department of the Navy, Defense, or the United States government. I have no financial interest except for the books that were mentioned in my bio, as well as we started a nonprofit organization called Real Battle Ministries, where my wife and I do this as an educational piece, trying to reach people and help spread the word and hopefully help some families out there. It's mainly a self-funded ministry because my wife says, you know, people don't like to hear that they're raising their kids wrong and, you know, mommy shaming out there. They don't want to hear that they're doing something wrong. And plus, if they have an autistic child or an ADD child, they definitely don't want to hear what I'm going to share with you today. But because you're physicians, you can handle it, and Andy was already hitting you hard with like, be a good doctor, you know, save him from facing the Lord or the Reaper, however you want to phrase it. But you will be shocked, and if this affects you, just take a deep breath. It's not your fault. You don't know the data. I spent the last 10 years of my life putting together this talk, and it's part of my job. That's what I do now. So keep in mind that I want to introduce the concept of digital media, light patterns on the retina, stimulating the brain like a cocaine or methamphetamines. Now, how does cocaine work? Cocaine blocks the reuptake of dopamine, okay? So you get high off your natural stores of dopamine. Methamphetamine squeezes it out like a tube of toothpaste. So if you have a thought or image or something you're looking at, it can turn you on like that, just like someone on meth and coke. Just think about that concept. So Applied VR is a company that creates video games through virtual reality stimulation and is able to reduce pain and use it for childbearing pain management during labor. This is their research. They showed that they can get up to 62% pain reduction in patients. The three references that I have here below, if you are interested, I'll send you my slide deck. They're from separate laboratories. Hoffman et al. Works out of the University of Washington, and they're using a virtual reality game called Snow World. You can scrub the burns and debris the skin, the dead skin, off of pediatric patients and adult patients while they're playing this game, and they rate the activity as being fun. If you're ever dealing with burn victims, that is not fun. But the kids will gladly get their burn scrubbed if they get to play this game. So, a concept of a digital drug, what does that mean? So here's a research study back in, I think it was like, let's see here, 2005, showing that just adding music to the games increases cortisol, and you can detect it in the salivary secretions. Okay, so as a neuroscientist, I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. Think about that. Music hits the ears through the auditory nerves, which is about 30,000 nerve fibers. Your optic nerve has 1.5 million in each nerve fiber, for 3 million total going to the visual cortex. Auditory is only 30,000. 60,000 if you count both ears. Goes to the auditory cortex, goes to the frontal lobes. You're processing if the music is pleasurable to you or not. Goes to your midbrain, fires dopamine for reinforcement of that music and that behavior. But it doesn't stop there. It goes to your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, and through ACTH stimulates the adrenal glands to secrete cortisol. But cortisol is a glucocorticoid. It goes diffuses through the blood-brain barrier, goes to your brain, activates hundreds of mRNA and gene transcription. So it's changing your brain physically to record that memory and that experience. This one shows that if you have two people playing video games and they know they're engaged with a human being, so these are males playing, their testosterone levels are higher than if they were playing just a computer opponent. That's fascinating too. So that means what they see, what they hear, what they perceive, what they think drives the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis to drive testosterone. And this last one is a 2013 study showing that gamers who are engaged in internet gaming, their brain lights up in brain areas just like if you're on cocaine, alcohol, or drugs. Okay, so it's like a drug. So therefore, there's going to be drug-like properties that can use it in clinical medicine. So for example, we know from research, gamers who play video games, they're going to be better surgeons than surgeons who don't play video games. I was a gamer. I am still a gamer. And if you ever play asteroids, it's like doing cataract surgery. So if you're really good at asteroids, you're really good at picking up those nuclear pieces as they're spinning around and sucking it up with the phaco needle. You have better hand-eye coordination underneath the microscope because of that. In moderation, because if you're playing games all the time, you're not going to be able to get to medical school and definitely not get selected for residency. It can be used to reduce anxiety and depression. It's shown that if kids play video games for 1 hour per day, there is emotional and behavioral benefit. Probably because you're not going Amish and they're not getting picked on because they're the only kid in the community not having access to games. However, that diminishes with time, and I'll talk about that in the later slides. It enhances memory skills. Remember how I talked about cortisol released? Glucocorticoid goes to your brain, changes gene transcription in the brain. Well, that's why. Because when you have an engaging speaker like Andrew Lee, your cortisol's up. Real live interactions, your cortisol's up. You're remembering everything. And that's why he said at the end, you will remember my voice. Because you will remember that voice, because that voice haunted me during residency for a blown pupil, third nerve. It's a great training tool. We use video games to train military, police officers, firefighters, nurses, medical. It goes on and on. We've gamified things in this society because it's fun. It helps with learning. A little bit of sugar helps you take the medicine. It's great at solving science problems. So this is fascinating research here. So they couldn't figure out how a simian HIV protein folded in crystal structure in the laboratory. And it took them decades. So they finally made a game called Fold It, where basically, if you know about crystal structures, you try to find the lowest energy states, and that's how it forms a crystal. Well, they let 20,000 multiplayer online gamers do it, and they solved it in 2 weeks. It's great for coping with PTSD. You can actually use video games now, like in sexual trauma or physical trauma or actually accidents. And if they play Tetris, it actually helps them not remember that traumatic event. And you can also use it to extinguish certain phobias, like fear of heights or fear of public speaking or fear of spiders. But I'm going to throw this out at you because you're very intelligent. If we can extinguish certain phobias, like fear of spiders, can we extinguish the fear and the anxiety associated with killing a human being? That's the first question. And every talk that I give to you in a school-age group, they're not physicians, but they all know where to shoot to kill somebody. Because in Call of Duty and Fortnite, it's 100 points for a headshot and 100 points for an upper body shot. So through basically pattern recognition and training, all the young kids know where to shoot to be lethal. Pain management I already talked about, so that's the reference. Okay, so knowing that research, watch this video and think to yourself, what's happening neurologically, neuroscientifically in this baby with the phone? This is on YouTube, and I love YouTube because you can actually do behavioral research on people who are really, foolish and putting their lives out there on YouTube, and you can actually study psychology and psychiatry and human behavior. And this is one of those cases. You may not want the sound too loud. But look what happens to the baby when the mom gives back the phone. Wow. If you're dealt with kids in the preoperative area, that's faster than Valium. That is faster than any narcotic you can give even by IV. It's instantaneous. And look how the baby's touching and getting feedback from the screen. As it hits the retina, it's stimulating all those hormones, endorphins, adrenaline, cortisol, giving that baby like this calming effect and focus on that phone. And even that smile. And then the mom does it again, but she does it like 3 or 4 times. I'm going to spare you this whole thing because she thinks it's funny. And they literally throw the phone at the baby. Check this out. But the baby picks it up again, and the same thing happens. So I was glad that I had to go through this public health degree that I did recently because I went through a second residency in aerospace medicine, and part of it is you have to get a master's of public health. So I'm going through this class, and we had a toxicology class, and we reviewed Dr. Paracelsus. He's a 1500, in the 1500s, he's the father of toxicology. He says, all things are poison. Nothing is without poison. Only the dose makes a thing not a poison. So think about that. Even air, water, they're all poisons. So even behaviors can be poisonous if you actually understand the neuroscience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not doctors, parents. This is not rocket science. This is neuroscience. So too much of anything is harmful. A little bit is just perfect. Too much is dysfunctional. The problem is the Kaiser Foundation did a research study back in 2010. The average American child consumes 7 hours, 38 minutes a day of entertainment digital media. This is not for education. This is not digital veggies. This is digital sugar because we all give them phones that are superpower computers following them around. So the negatives with overuse. So when I started giving these talks back in 2010, there was less than a dozen peer-reviewed papers in the National Library of Medicine. Today, there are over 1,100 on video game addiction. And it's still not in the DSM. It's still not in a textbook. And I still get hate mail from doctors who's saying I'm doing a disservice by pointing this out because it's not in a textbook. So I reply back, I'm like, okay, so before syphilis was not in a textbook, you're telling me syphilis wasn't around? We live in a world where people think they know everything, but yet we know nothing. And very little of what God has created us for and our universe and, things that we have, that He gave to us. We have very little knowledge of Him, and that's the problem, and people are losing their way. So it causes sleep deprivation. It's not just the blue light. It's the adrenaline, the testosterone, the estrogen. You get on Facebook and you talk about political stuff, you're up all night. You're getting that feed, and you're all jacked up on adrenaline. Your heart is racing. If you have a little Fitbit or a Apple Watch, monitor your heart rate. It'll jump up at least 20%. I've done that. I'm monitoring my heart rate, and I'm like, man, I got to get off this discussion because I'm going to go postal on somebody. Gamer rage. Gamer rage can occur because of all those hormones. That's the research paper on that. I don't need to belabor that. Too much will cause depression, anxiety, and antisocial behavior, right? Too much of something, especially in kids. They get FOMO, fear of missing out. So you give your young teen a phone, they're not invited to a party, and they are so depressed being reminded that they're left out. Unfortunately, that family had to pick only 10, and especially in the time of the pandemic, they had to go, minimal interactions. Your child will get left out because they can't be invited to every single party out there. But with social media, they're connected to 100 friends or associates. Failure to achieve potential is a huge one because the gaming just sucks so much time, and the gaming companies make it so that you spend all your time on there because they want engagement to make money. So one of the most popular games is called Genshin Impact. And I'm not saying they're addictive. I know I'm being videoed here. I don't want them to come after me. Actually, if they come after me, it'd probably be better, actually, if I got sued. I'd sell more books that way, actually. So what's interesting about this is that Genshin Impact made $1 billion in 6 months. It's a free-to-play video game on your phone, but it's an Xbox, PlayStation quality console game that's completely free. But they use gambling elements to get people to pay to get certain characters in the game. And people are dumping thousands of dollars on this. So if the addiction rate is 10%, they only bank on, let's say, 100 million players play it, 10 million would be addicted. 10 million will drive $1 billion industry in 6 months. That is where the gaming industry is going right now. We're in the wrong business. Cataract surgery just got cut down another, few $100 per case. These gaming companies are making so much money. And then in extreme cases, family abuse and violent behaviors. And so you got to be careful about this. And so when I wrote my book, Hooked on Games, I interviewed Pastor Dietrich. His son, Daniel Dietrich, was basically addicted to a certain game, a shooter game. They got him the game machine because he was injured in a sporting accident. And so they just wanted him to rehab and just pass some time with some sports games. But he got really drawn to the violence because that's the most arousing. We get aroused, so anything that's sexual and violent, that's what the human mind wants. And so he was drawn to that. And Pastor Dietrich says, we're not about this in this family. I'm going to take this game away. So Daniel walked out there and says, Mom, Dad, close your eyes. I have a surprise for you. He shoots his mom in the head, kills her, shoots his dad in the head. Somehow his dad survives. But through the grace of God, he has forgiven his son. But his son is now spending a life sentence in federal prison for killing both parents. But the only thing that he walked away with that night was the game and the game machine. It's very sad. So really, what's this about? Digital veggies. These are the digital veggies. E-textbooks, textbooks for work and learning, email for work, the classic subjects in school. For me, I had to digest biostatistics in the last 2 years, so that was my veggie. Candy, what is it? Social media for fun, not for business. Gaming for fun, not for therapy. Videos for fun. E-textbooks or actually e-books for entertainment. Text with friends and also email for fun. So I asked my daughter, who was 6.5, she's now almost 15, this question. This was not staged, because at that age, they don't have the frontal lobe. They're not brain ready for impulse control. So they just answer so honestly. For those who have kids, you understand what I'm saying. This is the perfect age. You ask them, am I a hero? They say, yes, you're a hero. But at 15, they kind of think about it for a long time. And usually the answer is no. So this is what she says.
Hi.
How old are you?
6.5.
Okay, Emily, do you like broccoli?
Yeah.
If I gave you a choice every day and put a huge plate of your favorite candy in front of a huge plate of broccoli, which would you eat first?
Candy.
Okay, so that's only an N of 1. Obviously, I'm not going to base my research on that, but the LA school districts did this project for you. They purchased $1 billion of iPads, rolled it out in 2013, had to re-roll it back because they didn't have the security features to fight the kids' brains that want the digital sugars. Ages 14 to 18. You know what they looked at? Porn and video games. Had to roll the whole thing back. And they actually sued Apple for that, and I think they got like maybe $600 million back or something. So now that's why I recommend Apple products, because they are locked down so hard that basically, or so tight, that even the FBI can't even break into the iPhone code. Remember the mass shooter with the iPhone? The FBI had to get a court order to even unlock that phone. So I do recommend iPhones for your kids. Lock it down, parental control, remove the app store, hide the passcode. Don't let them look at the passcode. Especially if you have a gaming addict or a phone addict, they're going to be sneaking around, try to hack into your phones. Anyway, so this is what happens when you have super arousing stimuli exposed to the brain. So this study was done in 2012, and they showed that there were abnormal white matter tracts in the areas of brain regions controlling emotional processing, executive attention, decision-making, and cognitive control. These are things that make you a really likable human being, but they're atrophying in the brains of internet addicts or internet gaming addicts. So why is this happening? So these are brain scans that are color-coded to show a National Institutes of Mental Health brain study over 10 years. And what they showed was the brain matures from back to front over 25 years. And so this is the back of the front, this is the front of the brain, okay? This is the back, front, this is 25 years. That's my son, just to show you what a kid looks like at different ages. Some people say that males, though, don't mature until like probably 50. I'm 50 now. My wife argues that. Okay, so blue areas are areas of the brain that's been pruned and mature. And you all know as ophthalmologists, at age 12, that's probably the pretty critical time period for visual cortex. The visual cortex is back here. If you don't fix amblyopia, it's actually probably permanent vision loss by teenage and beyond. So what happens is the brain matures from back to front. But look what's matured first in little kids. Visual cortex, somatosensory, auditory, and the senses. That's why they love the phones. They don't have the frontal lobe to resist. You're feeding the very thing that their brain is already programmed to do, to interact with the world with things they taste, touch, see, and hear. That's why that little baby was touching that phone and enjoying it. Not that it was smart. These smart devices actually make us dumber. If they actually were hard to use, you all wouldn't use them because they're friggin' hard to use. But they made them smart so that we can use them easily. Even a little baby can control it. But here's the problem. What I'm seeing, and I fear, or I'm concerned, I don't fear anything, but I am concerned, actually I fear God, but I don't fear, concepts that I'm describing. But my point is that what I'm concerned about is that are we seeing a frontal lobe amblyopia? Because we're seeing autism actually rise. And I'm seeing cases where they're coming to me for vision screening or vision, evaluations because they have developmental delay. But I take a complete history and you take one step further and ask them how much iPad time they have, how much screen time, and it's like 8 to 10 hours a day. We take it away, and in medicine, temporality, I don't have a research project for it because I don't have an IRB to say, okay, I'm going to do this study, and it's going to be so hard for me to do anyway. But temporality, if you remove the screen and the child gets better in 6 months, where you have a severely autistic diagnosis at 2, but in 6 months they're normal, it's probably the screen that caused it. And we're seeing thousands and thousands of cases like that around the world. And that's what breaks my heart, because when you pass that developmental age, let's say frontal lobe maturity of 20, you may have a permanent damaged brain. So how does it work? So I break this down like this. So use your left hand as an analogy if you want to use this to describe to people you love. Yeah, there's definitely benefits of gaming. Hand-eye coordination, all that. That's represented by the thumb. So imagine your brain is represented by all these fingers, but the other fingers represent, let's say, communication skills, relationships, empathy, self-control, athletic ability, poetry, music, goes on and on and on. But if they're spending like 7-10 hours a day on screens, they're going to be all thumb thinking without the other aspect. And so it's going to be similar to visual amblyopia. It's just the frontal lobe has now been shut down and they've passed their developmental milestones for speech or communication. So we said your child's brain's a great resource. Victoria Dunkley is a pediatric psychiatrist. She shows that when you take screens away from kids, it ends meltdowns, raises grades, and even ends like depression, anxiety, cutting, and suicidal ideation. But she can't come out and say that it's a cure because she's a board-certified psychiatrist, and her medical societies will go after her because there's no research study to show that this is the direct cause. So the problem is, if we're waiting for research, like they did for alcoholism, it took alcoholism 50 years before it got into an official DSM diagnostic code. Can we wait 50 years? By then, all our kids will have grandkids. And so, as I'm sharing with you all this information, how many families are being affected and they don't even know it? So this is my son, this little personal story here. So my son was addicted to games. And so we were losing him because we were cutting his games down to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 1 hour only per day. But all he talked about was how to do headshots and how to shank people with knives, because that's what he was playing, these games that were sniping people and killing people. So my wife's like, Andy, we're losing him. His grades are going down, we're losing him. So we finally took the games away, like Victoria Dunkley recommended, and there was a miraculous raising of his grades. He washed my car because he was bored, okay? And he was trying to look for ways to build relationships with his parents. Then he tried out for the track and field team a year later, and the coach goes, whoa, you can run a half mile and 2 flat without any training? So with a little bit of training, 6 months later, he ran an 800 in 155. He ran a mile in 411, a 2 mile in 905, and a 5K, which is 3.1 miles, in less than 15 minutes. So he leads his team in California to the first state championship in cross country. He finally ends up at Liberty University after attending University of Portland for 2 years and on a track scholarship. and long-distance scholarship, and he has a video to share with you.
Hi, my name's Nick Doan. When I was younger, my dad, he wasn't really there for me. He was mostly playing video games, and he got me addicted to it. And ever since then, I just played a lot. I got really addicted to online addiction to everything. And then my life came crashing down because that's all I knew. When my parents were having a hard time dealing with each other because of gaming, my mom left and went to Oregon with my grandma, and my mom and I and my little sister Caitlin, we were just by ourselves with my mom, and pretty much had no idea of what a dad was. They didn't divorce, but they got back together, and we started living together again, and my dad finally quit gaming, and then he forced me to stop gaming, and I wasn't ready for that. Both my dad and I had to find something else. I found the track, my dad found motivational speaking and companies. I ran my first race, I ran the 550, and I remember dying the last 150, and just complete pain. Just complete pain, but it was so much joy because I knew it was over, and from that very moment on, I knew that I had something going for me, that I was going to be a runner. The funny thing is with running is the more pain you inflict on yourself, the faster you go, and it's not about how hard you hit somebody, it's how much pain you can take and keep going and finish through the line. The only thing that's telling you or restricting you is yourself, that you can do it. It's just, you need to tell yourself, you need to be confident, because if you tell yourself you can't, you can't. If you tell yourself you can, you can. Ever since my dad's been talking about gaming, he's been opening the eyes of people who have not heard of the topic of video game addiction and online addiction, and how it's ruining little kids' lives, and it's really sad. So he wants to help people. Not many people have been talking about it. It's awesome. I love my dad, and he's shown me that anybody can change.
So it's easier for my son to throw me under the bus than for me to come out from the beginning. But when I did the research on this and read the literature, I'm like, man, yeah, it's right on. I was raging. When I was at Hopkins, I played from 25 to 35, even during my residency at Iowa, 80 to 100 hours a week. So God made me have the ability to be a go-getter where I can actually function on very little sleep, but I became basically hypomanic when I don't sleep. And so the joke in the ophthalmology community, if you guys know some of the, have known me long enough, they joke around saying, oh, Andy Doan, he's manic depressive without the depression aspect. And so that's how I live my life. And so that's how I was able to survive medical school. But here, my wife wanted a picture of Nick and me when he was younger. I was gaming all night. I'm all greasy. I was playing Ultima Online, which was one of the first multiplayer online role-playing games, in the background there. And take a quick picture. She takes them back. I continue playing. And so a lot of weekends, I played through the whole 72 hours. And then go to school, sleep in class, pass my grades. And you guys know the joke, right? It's like B is MD. So I was at Hopkins. So I figured if I'm the bottom of the class, which I wasn't actually, thank God, I was in the top half, by the way. But so I'm not that much of a loser. But literally, I figured if I was at the bottom of the class, I'm still in the top 100 of 16,000 medical students. So who cares? I can game all night. And I was an atheist at that time. Now being saved in Christ, I have a different perspective on how to, work on my time. So this is why we came up with the guidelines for you all. I know I'm running short on time, so I'm just going to list it here. It's on our website, realbattle.org. But it's easy. Limit digital media and gaming less than 1 hour a day. Text less, call people instead. Budget time for daily exercise. Spend face-to-face time with family and friends. Follow the ratings. I'll let you guys take pictures. You guys are all smart. You don't need me to go through all this. Definitely don't give smartphones until they're 14. And no digital media for under 2 at all. And we're going to go to the next slide and you take a picture of this one too. So I worked with the experts in the field and we came up with these guidelines. From 0 to 2, no screen time whatsoever. Their brain development is so critical. 3 to 5, 1 hour a day. But get the old school Mr. Rogers. Buy the DVD set of the Partridge Family, Mr. Rogers. They're slower. And this is based on research by Dimitri Christakis. Videos today, you can even time it on a timer. It's every 5-second changes. So it's just looking at trying to get our attention. But Mr. Rogers is a slower changing, and so it actually allows brain development and engagement. So therefore, that child, when they sit in class and the teacher can't change scenes every 5 seconds, they will be attentive. So I'll give you another piece of evidence. Technology executives send their kids to Waldorf schools. Waldorf schools have no technology until 16. They actually sign a consent form. They can't even use search engines. So parents are worried that their kids are going to be behind in tech. It takes 4 months for the 16-year-old to catch up with the other tech natives. 4 months. Your kids aren't losing out anything because they still have 9 years in brain development to 25 to learn the technology. So your kids and the people that you know will be leaders of tomorrow while everyone else will have a very damaged, very delayed brain. So what Jesus said in Matthew 22, 37, 39, he said, the Pharisees were questioning him, what is the biggest, what's the most important commandment? And Jesus was citing the Old Testament here. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second one's like that. You got to love your neighbor as yourself. So if our children and us even, if we're not loving God first and our neighbors like ourselves, and they love the screens more, something is not right. And we need a refocusing in our lives, in our children's lives, in our grandkids' lives. So thank you. If you wanted my book, you can get it for free. Just go to this website, tinyurl.com, Andrew Doan, fill out a little review, improve my talk, say you're a complete crazy guy or slow down and whatever. Give me feedback. I improve the talk every time I get these feedback. And then I'll give you a PDF download for my book. Thank you.
Spend 5 or 10 minutes doing a few questions. This is obviously important to a lot of us, so with teens. So does anybody have a question for Dr. Doan? Yes,
yeah, being that this is a Christian Ophthalmology Society, a lot of my friends and family at churches discuss violent games for kids. So that data that you were mentioning about violence, do you have a perspective on
Oh, yeah.
the Christian aspect versus the secular aspect of what age group kids should be playing violent games?
Sure. We have the King David complex as men. We love to fight. I mean, King David did. I mean, he slayed tens of thousands over Saul. And so we're programmed for that. We're programmed to be heroes. And so our little kids, our little boys particularly love that. You don't even have violence in your home and they pick up something like a broomstick and they make a gun out of it. It's just inherent to them. So the research by Bushman is very clear. The problem with the video game research is that you'll never get an IRB for truly testing GTA and Call of Duty on a minor, because those are adult games. If you're sitting in an IRB and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to expose a 6-year-old to GTA, you guys will all reject my grants or my request. So what they do is they get a boxing game that's violent, PG-13, and that's what they do research on. And so when you do the meta-analysis on this thing, it's muddled. The Pearson coefficient is 0.17, just a mild correlation. We're doing it wrong, and we're also doing it on healthy college-age students who have impulse control who were able to get to college. What we need to do is do research on the kids who are stuck in their basements and failed out of life with their parents in their homes playing video games, and do the research on violent video games on them. So the research that Bushman was able to do was, like, for example, if you expose a kid to pro-social games, they tend to have pro-social behaviors. If you expose kids to violent games, they tend to have violent behaviors. And one of the research studies that they did in 2017, 2019 was fascinating. They had a model gun, like a real gun out, but unloaded. The kids that played violent games tend to pick up that gun and shoot it, more likely than kids that didn't. Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, we're teaching our kids to kill. He's a fascinating, he's a Army Spec Ops psychologist. And he does a lot of research on this. And it's very clear. The violent media makes the kids tend to want to be more violent. Not all kids, some.
So the first real wave of violent video games probably are, 15 years old. So I'm assuming those guys now are, about 25? What, do you have any research on what those guys are like, what this is having an effect on the workplace or in school?
That's a great question. I don't have any research on that, but I did work with Matus Gola, who works on porn addiction. And so what he's shown was that they often, when they took him off the porn, they gave him SSRIs for anxiety problems. But what's amazing about SSRIs, because he's a neuroscientist who actually scans the brain, the amygdala, when you're under SSRIs, actually gets quiet down. The amygdala controls anxiety, so they make them less anxious. If you reduce the anxiety, they tend to act out more. So these porn addicts who never acted out before, and I'm making an analogy here, that's why I'm going through this, the porn addicts started acting out. So they had one, like he had multiple cases, but he published a case series in the MRI studies. The porn addicts started acting out, cheated on their wives with the babysitter. One porn addict went on a sex tour in Asia. Another porn addict went to prostitution and couldn't get off on SSRIs. And so his theory is that SSRIs calm them down. So now I'm flipping over the game side because no one's done this research. When I heard this, I'm like, man, this is it. So now you have a gamer who's addicted, HPA, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, is off kilter. There's evidence that that causes psychiatric breakdown, literally psychotic breakdowns. So now you have someone super anxious, walks into the psychiatrist's office. Now what they give them is SSRIs. It lowers their inhibition. I did publish a paper, I can talk about it, you can look it up. It was a certain person who played 60 to 80 hours a game, became homicidal, and was sleep deprived. Came to a sleep clinic, and basically, this should not be recorded at this point, but you can strike it out of the thing. So basically, what happened was he became sleep deprived. We gave him like tons of trazodone. He wouldn't sleep, but it was the gaming. So it actually was taking the games away. Then his homicidal ideations went away. That's one case, but no one's doing the research.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Doan.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. We got that microphone from him.